All right, let me start by kicking off this. I'm going to start by stating some facts. Maybe many of you have heard about this as well. It was reported that in 2022, on Ethereum decentralized exchange, Frontrunners extracted $128 million revenue, of which $26 million were profit. So my first question to Ignacio probably is, where does this money come from?
Well, it comes from the users. That's the main problem. So the idea of front running is basically when you see a really nice opportunity and you think, oh, I want to buy this token, it's really cheap. So then you submit your transaction and then you realize that someone else wrote the same transaction as you, but it goes just in front of yours. And then you lose all your money. So in that sense, it comes from the users of the blockchain.
So it's basically extracting value from the users. That's how would you define front running? Yeah, do you want to tell our audience what is front running basically?
So front running, the idea is basically I'm a user and I want to buy some token because today is really cheap. I don't know, Luna crash or whatever reason. And then you submit the transaction and someone else, traditionally a miner, that's why we also talk about it as part of MEV, miner extractable value. And they somehow manage to create the same transaction as you, but instead of you getting the token, it's someone else that is getting the token and paying the same amount of money as you would pay, and then you lose your opportunity to do such a transfer. So that's why it's called front running, because it runs in front of your transaction.
Awesome, thank you. Vito, why do you've done a lot of research on front running, more specifically on XRP Ledger. Why do you think this is an important problem? It's an important research problem. Why do you think it should be prevented?
Well, it's a very hard problem to solve. And personally, I'm very fascinated by very hard problems. But more realistically, front running is enabled by the design of a blockchain. It's what I would say it's a bug in the design of blockchain systems in general that enables front running. And so
it's a fundamental problem.
It's a fundamental problem. And so because it's a problem, the problem has to be fixed. And in addition to that, well, the users or the traders of the blockchains, they're losing money. And if I, as a trader, I'm losing money, well, maybe I won't want to trade tomorrow because, well, what's the point? It's safer in centralized exchanges. And so if you want to attract more traders, more volume, we need to make blockchains a safer place to trade.
That explains, yes, it is an important problem. So you mentioned that front running exists because of some fundamental problems in the design of blockchain. Do you want to talk about what is it that enables front running on blockchains in general?
Yeah, sure. So they're kind of the way I imagine it is as a triangle. There are three core properties. The first problem is that when a user submits a transaction, its content is public. On top of that, there is a time delay between when the transaction is submitted and when it is finalized in the blockchain. And so the fact that the content is public and we have this small time delay, front runners can make decisions based on what I'm about to do. They have a small window into the future. The second problem is that the transaction order, the order in which transactions are executed in a block can be gamed. So for example, in Ethereum, all the front runner has to do is pay a higher or lower fee than the victim, and that's how they affect where in relation to the victim their transaction executes. And the final cornerstone of front running is the fact that the design of the decentralized exchange forces the user to buy assets at a higher than optimal price. So for example, on automated market makers, this comes out as a slippage tolerance to combat the market fluctuation. but it is enough to eliminate only one of these three properties to make front-running maybe not impossible in the academic sense, but significantly much more difficult than it already is.
So these are the problems fundamentally in the design of any decentralized exchange, let's say.
Yes, I would say so.
Decentralized exchange that enables front running. So do you agree? Do you want to add something more, Ignacio?
I mean, a point to make, I would say that front running is not a security issue, because it's not like because of front running you can lose your money or things like that. It's more a matter of fairness. Like some actors can take advantage of the other users. And as Vito explained, the idea is that you put a high fee and your transaction is going to go before. So that's kind of a way to guarantee this fairness. But there is something important, that in all these protocols, there are fixed entities that we usually call miners or validators that create a block, and they decide which transactions go in the block. So even in this situation, these entities, even if you select an insanely high fee, they can still front run you, because they take the decision on the order of transactions in traditional blockchains. So that's a really important point to make in my opinion, because a lot of these arguments for, oh, you just can put a high fee and you can prevent front running, are based in a really rational model that does not consider these entities having all the privileges of deciding regardless they want.
Agree, yeah. So you talked about transaction ordering and how generally we have miners or block producers, but it works differently. The consensus mechanism works differently on XRP Ledger, and you have done quite some research. So do you want to talk about how front running is different on XRP Ledger versus on other blockchains, and the work that you have done in terms of how we can mitigate some of that?
Yeah, for sure. So to kick things off, the good news is that front running on XRP Ledger is much more difficult than on Ethereum already.
That's a good news.
That's fantastic news. And the reason being is that the developers of XRP Ledger forethought about this issue, that transaction execution order might be manipulable. So instead of using the transaction fee as the metric by which to execute the transactions, they use something that is called the canonical order. And in essence, all it is kind of a set of rules that are used to sort the transactions, and the end result is it's a pseudo-random shuffle. So that means that already from the get-go, the front running on XRP Ledger is probabilistic, in a sense that front runner has 50-50 odds of winning. So if the sorting algorithm places the front runner's transaction before the victim, they win. If the transaction goes after the victim, the front runner loses. So that's already good news. But, and here's the kicker, one of the more attractive properties of XRP Ledger, the fact that a single transaction costs less than a ruble, also means that a front runner can use multiple accounts to increase the odds of winning. So if we think it in terms of flipping a coin, if the coin lands heads, I win, and I need only single heads to win, well, I can throw multiple coins, and as long as I get one heads, I win.
And the cost of throwing these coins is really, really low in
XRP
Ledger.
Yeah. So that's how front running looks like on XRP Ledger, and this is not theory. We have already seen front running happening on the order book, and with the introduction of the automated market makers, there's the techniques that apply on Ethereum decentralized exchanges could also apply on the automated market maker of XRP Ledger.
So you've defined the problem. You've defined how it can happen on XRP Ledger. would you like to tell our audience, you have done some research on how we can mitigate, well, it's hard to eliminate it, but how we can mitigate front running on XRP Ledger?
It's hard. The bottom line, it's really, really, really hard. Because again, these are kind of the fundamental properties of the blockchain. And so, like I said at the beginning, all we have to do is eliminate one of these three properties to prevent front running. So for example, the way we can eliminate a gameable transaction order is by introducing something called fair transaction order. Not to go into kind of the big details, but the bottom line is that the consensus algorithm has to be extended so that the validators now also vote on the order in which the transactions are executed.
But that's a big change that you're talking about. It's like a change on the consensus protocol. And I know our friend Ignacio has a different perspective on that.
Yeah, and also, it's not only that it's a big change, that the technique that Vito just suggested, it has also an impact on the message complexity. So in the traditional consensus, you need to exchange some order of messages. If you want to guarantee the fair order, you need to basically almost increase by a factor of n, when n is the validators that you have, or in the case of Ripple, the size of the UNL. This doesn't sound that bad, but when you try to analyze it, it can really hurt the efficiency. So there are other techniques that have been considered in the wild. One of them that I think it could be pretty good for the Ripple case is using threshold cryptography. So the idea, as Vito explained, is that transactions are open. Everyone knows the content of a transaction, so you can try to front run it. The idea is that the UNL would have some kind of a threshold key, so the users can encrypt their transaction. So a single validator doesn't have access to the content of the transaction, cannot predict what this transaction is going to do. But at the same time, once the round is finalized, you create the block and everything, the UNL can reconstruct and decrypt the key. Because one of the main problems with threshold cryptography is that usually it's asking the users to be online all the time, which is not desirable. That's one of the options, and the other one is regarding the coins that Vito said. Like, the coins are really easy to toss, so you can do a lot of transactions trying to front run. The option would be to take these transactions when you transfer $1,000, for example, and you could break them in transactions of only $1 each, and then apply this canonical order to each of these small transactions. So in reality, you don't front run, you don't manage to front run anymore, but you create a mixture of the transaction does not go before me, it goes in a concurrent way. So this really disincentivizes front running.
So basically break down the bigger trades into smaller trades, and since the transaction cost is really low, you can use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
And beat the front runner. They are trying to take advantage of low transaction cost. We can do that too. Okay, that's cool. I know, like Vito, you talked about one of the factors being the slippage tolerance that a trader has to put in when they are trading against a decentralized exchange, and that's one thing that's exploitable for front running. So what mitigation technique would you suggest for that?
Perhaps this might be one of the hardest problems, because what this to solve, because what this requires is a completely new design, decentralized exchange, which eliminates the necessity of slippage tolerance. So there are many academic works that maybe perhaps they suggest that all the trades that against the same pool in the same block are maybe executed at the same average price. So there's a lot of research being done right now, but the challenge is that these works they're fundamental, they're excellent, but what's needed next is core research. How do we apply these designs concretely on XRP Ledger? Because we have the kind of the fundamental problems of the design, but then we also have the fundamental technical problems. How do we actually implement this design? Yeah, so that's kind of that's a big challenge that we need to figure out next.
That's fair. I think in the interest of time, I would like you to, before we open it up for Q&A, what's the one key takeaway or what's the call to action from your perspective for the audience here today?
So in my opinion, the takeaway would be the XRP Ledger is more resilient than most of the blockchains out there against front-running, but it's still not perfect. Yeah. And front-running has been steadily increasing over the last years. So I would really think that this is an issue we need to address now before it becomes too big and it hurts the XRP Ledger.
I agree, and with the addition of automated market maker that we are proposing now, that things might get worse. So we need more research in this direction.
And conferences like this exactly, where we have experts, leading experts on XRP Ledger here at UBRI, I think that, and maybe this is my public invitation, is that we need call to action. Sorry, this is my call to action. We need concrete research that focuses exactly on XRP Ledger, that provides solutions that fit to XRP Ledger. Because this blockchain is very unique in comparing to everything else that's out there. So the solutions that might work for Ethereum might not work for XRP Ledger. So what we need is researchers, again, focusing solely on this blockchain to solve these problems.
Great, thank you both. And now I'd like to open it up for Q&A. Yes.
So I have a question actually. What's your thoughts on so there's been some startups like Terablock and Phoenix that are kind of working on encrypting transactions as a way to prevent front running. I was wondering what's your thoughts on encrypting transactions to kind of hide away what's inside of them so people can't front run them.
So, in my opinion, it really depends on the protocol. In the case of XRP Ledger, you have already kind of a committee that can do threshold cryptography. So in that case, I can support it. I think it's not my favorite choice, but it's a really good and easy approach. In the case of the majority of blockchains, I wouldn't recommend it. And the main reason is that you can encrypt craft. The adversary can create a lot of bullshit transactions, and they are encrypted. The miners, validators don't know that there's nothing there, just random numbers, and you can really hurt the efficiency of the protocol. So, but I also understand that it could potentially be combined with some zero-knowledge proofs to guarantee the validity of a transaction.
I would also, the only thing I would add is that threshold encryption comes at a cost. And the cost of threshold encryption is that you have to slow down the blockchain. Because now it takes a little bit of extra time for the validators to derive the decryption key so that the transaction it has to be delayed.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thanks.
So basically, I want to understand, okay, thank you, that these front runners, their intention is that they're just sitting over there and they're waiting for a user to make a transaction or a call for a transaction. And they say, hey, this user sees value in this. You know what, then let me buy it, and then possibly I can sell it for higher to these users back. Is that really what they want to do?
You nailed it. That is exactly what front running is. I'm exploiting the fact that the front runner is exploiting the fact that whatever the user is buying it for is a little bit more expensive than the actual value. And so the front runner buys the asset for the actual value and sells back to the user at the increased price.
And
So
the
the-
difference is the profit what the front runner earns.
So, but see, like the user, say they buy something, let's say for $10, right? Now, I make the call for the transaction, and then the front runner buys it for $10 as well, right? So beats my transaction by coming in front of my transaction, right? Now, so that means that they're going to sell it to me back for $10.10. Now I have to pay an extra 10 cents, which is their profit. Is that how it works?
A little bit differently. The way this would work, let's say concretely on XRP Ledger is that in the decentralized exchange, something might be sold for $9, but the victim is buying it for the $10.
Mm-hmm.
And there are legitimate reasons where you might want to do that. And so what the frontrunner does is buys the assets for $9 and then sells it for $10 to the victim.
So how I'm not losing anything then?
Well, without the frontrunner, your transaction would have been executed at $9. So because the blockchain guarantees you the best possible price, not whatever you want to buy.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
basically, the transaction is I'm willing to buy this for a price of up to $10.
So that's the slippage tolerance that we talk about, and that's what's being exploited.
Oh, okay.
You could ideally buy it at 9, but you are willing to buy it up to 10. If there was no front runner, you could buy it at 9, but the front runner is pushing you to. You're still getting it within the limits that you stipulated, but you could get better.
So does that like beat the whole purpose of the technology? Like meaning the efficiency of the technology, me trusting the technology, me saying that, hey, this technology is so super that it's going to give me the best possible outcome as compared to any other technology. But then it beats the purpose of it because the front runners come in and then the technology loses its value.
You nailed it.
It does to some extent, but there are other things that are better. Like, for example, like it's a decentralized exchange. You get all the benefits of a decentralized blockchain technology. Combine order book based exchange with automated market maker. It provides you 24/7 liquidity. All the time liquidity is available. You will always get a price quote. It may not be the best, but you'll always have liquidity. There are certain guarantees. It comes with trade-offs, but yeah.
Given that the front running or the MEV, whenever you have a public, this one is impossible to solve. Is it the case just like in Ethereum, when it has switched to POS, it's only the penalty that can be made to fear people not to do that?
No, I think there are techniques that you can prevent from running. So even if everything is public, you can run a fair order algorithm that basically prevents from running by achieving some kind of weaker consensus among nodes. So in my opinion, I would say that it's solvable without penalties.
100%. It is a solvable problem, and you already have theoretical solutions to these problems. But now what is needed is turning the theoretical solution to an actual implemented practical solution.
The question is defining the fairness would be an issue.
It is a challenge, and all different academic papers provide different definitions of what fair is, but we could have another 2-hour discussion on what is fairness, so.
I have a question about, so one of the big issues is the fairness. If somebody has an idea of buying, he should get the first look at it, or first crack at it, right? My background is from the centralized exchanges and all that, but the big challenge is how you can identify the time at which order was placed. It's a technological problem. Can it be solved that you can actually sort trades based on when it arrives?
That's exactly the approach of fair order. The user basically will send this transaction to a lot of miners and validators, and then you don't actually talk about real time, you only talk about logical time. So if for validator 1, my transaction arrived before Vitos, and for most of the validators my transaction arrived before Vitos, we can agree that my transaction was earlier. So basically what you do is, we don't know how it works, the network can be really bad, but we look at the majority of the validators. There is a lot of technicalities that I'm omitting for the sake of time, but that's the main idea.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, both of you, and thanks everyone else. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.